Hello, today I want to talk about pacing. Pacing in a navigational sense is used to work out how far you've walked or how far you've got left to walk. And the ability to pace is one of the fundamental skills which everybody who goes out into the hills and the mountains should have. The basic idea is if you know how many paces it takes you to cover 100 meters, then you'll also know, or you'll be able to work out how many paces it will take you to cover 150 meters or 75 meters or 300 meters. So you know if you need to walk to somewhere, then you'll know how many paces it will take you to get there. Now, here's a point that I don't think you'll see in many other descriptions of pacing, and I'm not sure why. So I'll do this as a question. How many people watching this video have been out pacing in the last 6 months or the last year? Ever? Anyone? Put your hand up if you have. Probably not. And that's the point. Most people go out walking, and to do that you need to navigate. Now you can navigate in lots of different ways. You can navigate from memory. Yeah, I've been here before and I know the way. Or a description of the route. Somebody might have told you the way. Or you can use a map and a compass. There's lots of ways to navigate, and however you do it is up to you. So you're navigating, and when you're doing this you're using lots of different techniques. Each of these techniques is used as and when it's needed, and it's the same with pacing. So let's keep things in perspective and firmly in the real world. So as we're keeping it in the real world, here's my take on pacing. Some people may disagree with this. If you do, let me know in the comment section. I would say that pacing is used when there is any doubts about your destination. For example, if you're heading to something that won't be obvious when you arrive, or if you're navigating in any form of reduced visibility, like heavy falling snow or fog or anything. So pacing, whilst it is an important skill, it's also important to know when to use it, and also, just as importantly, when not to use it. So I'll go over my ideas of when you shouldn't use pacing at the end of this video. Anyway, enough. Let's get on with this and say, how do we actually do pacing? A pace is simply the distance that you travel every double step. So when you're counting, it's not 1, 2, 3. It is 1, 2, 3. So you're counting double steps. Now it doesn't matter which foot you count, your left or your right, as long as you always count the same one. As it hits the floor, that becomes one extra pace. So the first thing to do before you can use pacing is you need to work out how far you travel each double step. And the way this is normally done is to count your paces over a 100-meter distance. Do that quite a few times and then work out an average. So, if you do it 4 times, then you divide the total paces by 4, and that gives you your 100-meter pace. Now, because I carry a 100-meter tape measure in my rucksack, I actually paced out along this track earlier on, and I found out that my double paces, or my double steps, my paces, work out at 64 per 100 meters. But don't forget, everybody's got different strides, they're different heights, people are made differently. So let's see if I can grab some people coming down this track and see if I can cajole them into walking 100 meters for me, and then let's see what their pace count is. So can I ask you, how many paces did you go in 100 meters? 56.
72.
74.
62.
64.
Thank you very much, I really appreciate that.
60.
66. 72.
70.
Thank you so much. You've been honestly, really do appreciate it. Now, most people don't carry a 100-meter tape measure. So we need to come up with a method that you can work out your average pace just using the equipment that you've got. Now, most people carry a map, so that's what we're going to use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pace from this wall here. This wall that comes down, the junction here behind me, and there's another wall just down there. I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll drop this onto your screen just so you can see what I'm doing. I'm here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk down to the second wall here, because that's quite a long way, and that'll give me a good average for my pacing. Now normally when you're measuring distances on a map, you'll use your Romer scales, which are these right angles here, but they're not that accurate. So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to use the ruler at the side of the compass, which gives me millimeters, so that's a lot more accurate. So if you look here, just here, it's quite straight there, and it's straight there. There's a bend in the middle, so I'm going to measure this in 2 different sections to make sure I get it as near as possible. So here we go. So there's my first measurement, gives me to there, and then I'll measure the second section, which gives me to there. So I've got here a total of 22 millimeters. Now this here is a 1:25 map, so each millimeter is 25 meters on the ground. So I know that between this wall here and this wall here is 550 meters. So I need to count my steps along this distance and then work out an average. The reason I'm walking a lot further than 100 meters, which is actually what I need to calculate my paces for, is that there is a margin of error in all maps, just caused by the printing process and the design process. As an example, this wall behind me, if it was printed to scale on a map, the line would be so small nobody would be able to see it. So they actually print things on a map normally larger than they actually are, just so that you can see them. Now with a 5% error margin, if I'm walking 100 meters, I could end up walking anywhere between 95 meters and 105 meters, which isn't going to make my counting of my paces very accurate. Now if you walk further, the margin of error stays the same. In other words, the thickness of that line on the map stays the same, so your error stays the same, say 10 meters. But if you walk further, the actual percentage drops. So if you walk 500 meters as an example, your 10 meter error is only 2% as opposed to 5%. If you walk 700 meters, that would be, should have brought a calculator, 1.4%. So the further you walk, the more accurate your pacing is going to be. Now because I'm walking 550 meters, I need a method of not losing count. So you know, I'm going along, I can't go 359, 360, that would just be madness. So it's not a good idea to count more than 100. So what I'm going to do is I've picked up some stones, and every time I get to 100, I'm going to transfer one stone to my other hand. That way that'll help me keep count. If you can't find stones, you can pick up blades of grass, or you can buy ranger beads on the internet. You can use your fingers. You can go sort of, when you get to 100, you go 100, and when you get to 200, 2, 300, etc. But I'm going to use stones. So now I won't be able to talk to you while I'm going down there. Pacing is inherently antisocial because you're counting your paces, you're looking where you're going, you're following your bearing, you just can't talk to anybody else. So I'll carry on down there from this wall to the second wall, and I'll talk to you when I arrive. So I'll just show you how it works. So this is, I'm now exactly at the wall, so I'll set off. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. There you are. So that was 352 paces. So give me 30 seconds. I'll tell you. All you do, by the way, to calculate, I'll use my mobile phone calculator because I can't do it in my head. All you do is you take your 352, the number of paces, and you divide it by the meters. So in my case, it's 352 divided by 550 equals 64. So my paces will average at 64 over this sort of terrain. Now we're going to have a look at how you actually use this in a real world situation, but before that you need to remember pacing is reasonably accurate. It's not precise, it's reasonably accurate. It can be 10% out either way. So if you're walking, say you're pacing 400 meters, you may arrive at your destination 40 meters before. That's fine. Or you may pace out your 400 meters and find that you haven't reached your destination. So there's nothing wrong with going another 40 meters. If your destination isn't within 10% either way of your pacing, that's the time to start a search procedure like boxing or whatever. But if you're not sure how to do search procedures, when I've got time, I'll do a video on that. So let's look at how we actually use pacing in a real world situation. So I know exactly where I am. I'm just here on the side of the road, and I want to head down to this green dotted line, which is a public right-of-way, and where the public right-of-way crosses the wall, there is invariably a gate or a stile or something. That's where I'm heading for. So I measure it once again using the millimeter scale. Don't use the Roma when you're pacing. So that is 5 millimeters. Okay, so 5 millimeters, don't forget, this is a 1 to 25,000 map, so 5 millimeters is 125 meters. So 125 meters, don't forget that I took 64 to go 100 meters. So I go 64 paces plus 25 meters, which is a quarter of 100, so that's 16, and 64 plus 16 is 80. So I need to leave from here on a bearing of 80 degrees for 80 paces, and I'll hit my track. So let's set off and see what happens. So here I am on a track, but this can't be my track because I've only walked 56 paces and I was supposed to walk 80 paces. So 56 is outside of my 10% margin error. So I need to keep walking in that 80 degrees for at least another, what's that, 86, at least another 24 paces, and hopefully I'll find my track as opposed to this one. So I've just counted 86 paces, so I've actually come more paces than I thought, but it is within my 10% margin. Now that's an important thing to note. I've just walking over some quite rough ground. Whenever you're walking over anything that's not a perfectly flat track, like when I counted my 64 paces. So if it's rough terrain, you're going around obstacles, up something steep, your paces will always be shorter. This is my track, it's 86 paces, so it does work. You need to have confidence that your pacing is going to work. Now, as I said at the beginning, there are times when you shouldn't use pacing. Well, in my opinion, you shouldn't. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. I'm sure some people will. But let's just go through when I don't think you should actually use pacing at all. Don't forget that pacing is just one of the many navigation techniques. It's just the tool that will assist you whilst you're out navigating. But the actual navigation is more important than the pacing. What pacing does is change one of the Ds. I'm not sure if you've heard of the 5 Ds of navigation: distance, duration, direction, description and destination. So distance, how far is it? What that does is, using pacing changes the D to a P. So instead of being how far is it, it becomes how many paces is it. Duration is just how long it will take. Direction is which way shall I go. Description will be what will I see along the route, and destination is what should I see when I arrive. So that's the 5 Ds. So what pacing does is it changes the first D, which is distance, into paces. I've seen lots of websites and folk online talking about navigating across the mountains for 2, 3, 4 or even 5 kilometers using pacing. But come on, let's bring this back to the real world. Unless you're walking through featureless terrain like, you know, a flat desert or a glacial snowfield, you really shouldn't have to pace for more than a few hundred meters. It's just in most normal situations. So if you do think that you have to pace for more than a few hundred meters, then you need to look at your other map reading and navigation skills, such as, I don't know, feature and contour recognition. There's collecting features, there's catching features, there's hand railing, there's attack points. There's always something that you can walk to closer to your destination than 3 or 4 kilometers. You know, that's crazy. It's just, and also it's not going to work. Pacing is a short distance navigation skill. It's a fundamental skill, but it's for short distances. Anyway, that's that. So when don't you use pacing? You don't use pacing when there is something that you can go to between where you are and your destination. That's when you start your pacing, when there isn't anything that you can go to closer. Okay, so back to pacing after my little rant. I'll have a coffee in a minute. So once you've practiced pacing a few times, you'll know when to use it and when not to use it. And you'll know when to combine it with other navigation techniques. So that's it really. Pacing is a fundamental skill that everybody should know if you're going out in the hills, and once you've practiced it a few times and you've got confidence in it, then you'll know that it really does work. So that's pacing. Thanks for watching.